Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Miss Andry today, the weekly live stream where we talk about issues relevant to men. If I'm coming through okay, because I know there's a little bit of a lag, just let me know and we'll kind of go from there. For those people that are new to the show, let's go ahead and go over a couple things. First, I want to talk about how to ask questions. We're going to have a presentation portion first, then we're going to go ahead and ask some questions, or I should say, we'll be able to answer some questions from the studio audience, or I should say, from the online audience. Um, if you are on a PC or if you are on Twitch TV, you'll see Bukkake choke slams that will show up occasionally on your screen. As those things come up, you'll see a small square box with my icon, a little gray box. You click that, you can redeem your Bukkake choke slams to ask a question, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. It looks like there's a possibility that the stream is not coming through, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh this real quick and see kind of where we're at. All right, looks like we are live. Just wanted to double check that. I know a lot of people were inside in the chat saying they couldn't hear, so I just wanted to double check that just to make sure that there were no technology hiccups on my end. I know there's a bit of a lag, so life happens while we make other plans. So let me go ahead and go through that question and answer piece again. So if you're on a computer, desktop, whether it's Mac or PC, or you're on Twitch TV, occasionally you'll see on the lower right-hand side of your screen a little green Bukkake choke slam coming up. Occasionally there'll be a little gray box with my Misandry Eye of Ra icon. You click that. You can use that to redeem questions. Those questions get logged, and then at the end of the stream during the Q&A session, I'll go ahead and answer those questions at that point. Now, if you're on a Roku or you're on a mobile device, you're going to want to you're not going to have that option. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put question in brackets, preferably in caps, and then you're going to want to direct that question to either DDJ, that's me, or the guest, which today is MGTOW Esquire, and then you'll type out your question. Please only put single part questions inside your question in the chat bar, because 2 and 3 part questions, I'm a one man show here right now. I don't have a feed in the cat producer, so I don't want to miss any questions. And then we'll just go from there. When the question and answer period comes up, I'll go ahead and repeat this information so that you guys have it, especially for those people that are new to the stream. For those people that are used to Twitch and are experienced with Twitch, I'm now an affiliate. So if you want to subscribe to the channel via Twitch, you're capable of doing so. Things have been extremely busy with me, just personal life as well as doing the stream, and I'm in the process of writing my next book. So I haven't formatted my bits yet. So the bit shares are very generic. I apologize for that. That's a work in progress, as is this stream. Other than that, that's pretty much where we're at. So what I do, again, for those people that are new, I get a single guest on every week. We do a deep dive into a particular subject that's relevant to men. Then we'll do a Q&A session at the end, and we'll get started. Now, this week's guest is MGTOW Esquire, who is an attorney. And MGTOW Esquire, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, how you doing? I'm MGTOW Esquire.
Right on.
I am a practicing attorney. I have been one for approximately 20 years. Many different areas of law. Presently, I'm in matrimonial law. It's a fascinating area, and it seems to be the most useful to well, certainly anybody in the MGTOW community, or people who will head down that path. I've learned many things over the years that hopefully will be useful. I've practiced in the areas of bankruptcy, immigration, litigation, collections. I know I'm forgetting a few. Basically, the simplest way to put it is I've handled cases and matters of every type of law except tax law and intellectual property.
Well, except under certain circumstances, friends don't let friends get into tax law, so I don't hold that against you.
Absolutely.
Tax law
I
can be a
always,
shit show, and going against the IRS in court is a fucking nightmare. So,
no kidding. And one of the things I always tell people is if I ever get to the point where, or rather, if the nation ever gets to the point where we get a flat tax and there's a lot of IRS agents that are just sort of cut loose, I'm going to be putting out an ad looking for former IRS agents just to get them across the table with me from me so I can flip them off.
Perfect. A little bit of accountability. It'd be like, hey, remember me?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're despised. They're like high-powered meter maids. It's a
They,
job no
they,
one should do.
well, they are, and I've actually done some tax law, and if you can get them across the negotiation table, there is emotional thinkers as an SJW, and they don't even know the tax code.
Yeah,
they're shoot from the hip. I mean, it's
of
as
course.
bad there as it is in family law, especially. And I'm speaking from a commercial standpoint because we helped a lot of businesses when I did that, so I get
Yeah,
that.
well, I mean, you worked in dog shitistan, if I remember correctly, and
Yeah,
my one of the things that I found particularly disgusting about dog shitistan is that their tax agency is the State Board of Equalization. If that doesn't tell you, if that doesn't tell you what they're about, you're missing the point, or you need to look up a few words.
right, right,
Equality of outcome is exactly their mission.
right.
It's
And
really
it's
truly disgusting.
well, yeah, they have so many tax agencies there. It is insane, and they tax for everything. And it's like,
Yeah,
really, really. And then they wonder why, their economy is failing and they've got forest fires and a statewide hepatitis epidemic and a homeless epidemic and the list goes on and on. It's
well, the funny thing to me is they're what are they, second only to Greece, or have they passed Greece in terms of a complete cluster farm of a economy?
I think they're getting close. I mean, I think they're at the very least they're neck and neck. Definitely that.
Economically, they've already pretty much fallen off the cliff and headed into the sea.
Yeah, and a lot of people lament the fact that they haven't. So
Yeah, I've got
I,
some friends over there. I feel sorry for them. It's just a horrible place to live. The
I
economy's insane, and the politics, the culture, everything there has just gone off the cliff.
right on. So let me ask you, how did you discover MGTOW? Like, what was your process? What's your history a little bit, obviously without doxing yourself, but what was your history? How did you discover MGTOW? How did you come to MGTOW?
Well, I the way it really started was I began to notice in the last I'd say somewhere in the 5 year range. I'm a fairly recent vintage MGTOW. What I came across it from was I was doing my basic daily research, and I looked into uh, pickup artistry. And what I came across was um, Chateau Artiste is one of the things I came across. I thought that was an interesting reads. And then I saw
Yeah, I look at him occasionally. He has some
yeah,
entertainment value. He's a little white nationalist for me, but that's okay.
well, that was back in the day. And
Right.
what I came across was the Sexodus, and then I came across it with Paul Joseph Watson, and then from Paul Joseph Watson I discovered Milo, and at some point I discovered Karen Strawn, and that's when the expression MGTOW came to my attention, and from there I jumped off to Sandman and to TFM, and that's pretty much the progression that I followed straight to TFM. And ever since then, I pretty much anything that TFM or you put out, I pay attention to. There's a lot of MGTOW content producers. Some of them are absolutely fabulous. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Human. He's awesome. There's a lot of really good ones out there right now. It's a pity some of the old timers are gone. I wasn't around to hear a lot of that stuff firsthand, but it's nice to see some of them coming back. I think Barbarossa's back. I think he was gone for a while, and I've been seeing some of those things. But yeah, that's how I came to make that. And once I started to see um, things you learn in the red pill that are reflected in life and observable reality, then you start to realize, okay, so I should be listening more closely to this stuff as a guide rule to life and
Right.
dealing with women.
And it's kind of funny you mention that because MGTOW always gets the stereotype of being like the neck bearded basement dweller. Nobody thinks that there's actually like successful people who have postgraduate degrees and successful careers and who are attorneys or who actually have lives that
It's
come to
true.
the MGTOW movement. And it's interesting you bring up a valid point, which is that MGTOW contains a lot of red pill truths that a lot of the other aspects of the manosphere, like they'll walk up to the edge, but they won't actually address it in the way that MGTOW does.
Correct. And I mean, the thing from the stream last night is very true. You look at the MRAs, and at this point, they're getting farther and farther into the MGTOW area, because MRAs are starting to figure out that's just not going to work. And I mean, I think their tactics and all was a great. They had a great mission, but it's not one that's achievable given current cultural realities.
I would agree with that completely. And I want to make sure people understand too. Not only do I not oppose the MRA movement, as a former MRA, I get where things are. My concern is that feminism has been institutionalized for over 50 years in every major institution in the first world in Western society. And so as MRAs pop up, because feminists have created an environment where female privilege and rights unearned through responsibility is considered equality, any advocation for true equality or even egalitarianism, if you support that, even just to bring it back to a baseline, is considered misogyny. It's considered woman hating. It's considered anything that attacks that privilege that they automatically have.
Absolutely correct. It's interesting because in the actual well, there's two main types of law. One is the statutory law, and the other is the common law, or the stuff that's present as judicial decisions. And while a lot of the statutes are gender neutral, the decisions that judges will use to apply them are not, because you've got an ancient history of common law white knighting that goes back to the Domesday Book, and women being taken care of by men. Historically speaking, men were responsible for their women, so as a consequence, they were treated better when they came to the law and needed help. But nowadays, with all this, the gender neutral statutory law, you're winding up with, it looks gender neutral on the surface, but it isn't in application, and
Right.
that's where we have systemic misandry right now.
I would agree with that completely. And it's interesting too that you bring up, even though we didn't actually mention it by name, but what you're talking about is you're talking about historical patriarchy. And
Correct.
the historical patriarchy, whether it was a guardianship system or whether it was just a balance system, was not the definition of patriarchy that feminists reframed it as.
Oh no.
Patriarchy, and I'm saying this more for the audience. Obviously, you and I have talked before, so we kind of understand each other. But for those people that don't
Yes.
understand, when we're discussing patriarchy, we're actually discussing the legitimate historical, dictionary definition of patriarchy. We're not discussing the feminist reframe or the redefinition that feminists have created as though it's like some society created for the express purpose of oppressing women. It's not only disingenuous, it's unethical. And so
And it's laughable.
it
It's
really is.
ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. If there was a real society patriarchy, feminists wouldn't even be able to express half, or not even 25%. If the boogeyman the way they describe it was real, they would be all in prison
Exactly. Or dead.
or dead.
Right.
It's ridiculous. So
Yeah, I would agree completely. So that's kind of how you came to MGTOW. Why does Turd Flinging Monkey resonate with you so much? I mean, I've been with him for a while, and I've got my own reasons there. But what are your thoughts on it?
well, number one, I love his sense of humor, and number two, as far as I'm concerned, he is one of the best and clearest thinkers in the MGTOW sphere. Now, that's not putting down any of the other ones out there. I really enjoy the fact that he's able to to lace together very clear, cogent thoughts with humor and deliver some pretty bitter pills in a hilarious fashion. So he's one of the best content producers, bar none, because he was able to weave these two things together, and he does it in such some comically. Sometimes it's gross, but it's
Right,
comically funny
right,
stuff.
right. It's
Just
definitely
beautiful,
memorable.
just
Well,
beautiful,
one
beautiful
of,
product.
yeah, and one of the things that I really respect about him is that he's able to take a lot of deep and complex subjects, sometimes postgraduate level subjects, and put them in layman's terms so that everybody can understand them.
That is
And
one highly educated, hyper intelligent monkey.
exactly, exactly. Not quite Caesar the monkey from Planet of the Apes yet, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Closer maybe to, what is it, Mojo Jojo?
Right. So, what brought your attention to me? And I'm not fishing for compliments here. I just, but it is what it is.
Well, I saw the original stream, DDJ's Inferno, and I found it fascinating and extremely useful. At the time, I was fairly new into matrimonial law, and you brought up a couple concepts that I had not really applied to matrimonial and family law. And they were extremely useful in my practice, and they were very helpful to my clients. Gave me a few more things to shoot for to give them a good result in court.
All right, so now I'm going to fish for compliments. What
Okay.
specifically did I bring up?
Well, it's a funny thing, and it's not something that comes up very often in family court. Um, the idea of the dismissal with prejudice. Well, that's common everywhere else in every other area of law. You basically do a dismissal of the opposing side's case, and they call it with prejudice, so it can't be reopened. And the idea in family law is if you got a crazy ex who is constantly hauling you in to adjust uh, custody arrangements or even child support, although that one's going to be trickier to get with prejudice because financial situations do change. But if you can prove, if you have evidence that she is out of her mind and off her rocker and not telling the truth in any way, you're going to be a much stronger position to try and argue to the judge, this person's going to haul us back in here every 6 months until you do something about this. And I've been back here 3 times already. Can we just get this thing dismissed with prejudice? We've got evidence that she's out of her mind and she's lying. Can we just put this in the grave and bury it?
Right.
And that is I think the one of the key elements to getting rid of some of these crazy bitches that cause all the trouble for men who are, I mean, the devastation that you face in a divorce situation is bad enough. Uh, and there's plenty of men who get suckered into child support who aren't even married, and the custody and the child support stuff, if you can gather the evidence, marshal the resources so that an attorney, it does take an attorney most of the time to get that kind of a result, but if you can put this stuff together and package it so a judge can understand it, you have a prayer of getting a decent result and not being hauled in on a regular basis.
I would agree with that completely, and I think that we, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the mini clinic form, portion. But I think that it's important to bring up now is that there's a huge difference between emotionally relevant facts that are relevant to the breakdown of the relationship and legally relevant facts. And
Absolutely.
what you know as a man or a husband or an ex husband or a father is a whole lot different sometimes than what you're capable of proving. And I think that's people don't go out and get divorced all the time. At least men don't. They hope that
Mhm.
they never get divorced, and so when they go through it, it's the most life changing thing of their life, and they don't know how to handle it because the stress level is so high and everything else. So they have to have somebody to kind of guide them through that because the emotions are so raw, and so they're not always capable of placing their best foot forward in a court situation. And the other
Correct.
point I wanted to touch on was that I agree with you completely about attacking the credibility of the ex, attacking the credibility of the mom. And one of the things that I went out to do early on, and I talked about this in my stream with the DDJ's Inferno with TFM when I first came on the internet, was not only, I like to, there's a saying I use in law, and that is choose your words with good taste, you may have to eat them. And,
Yeah, really.
and so with the no fault divorce system in many locations, or even in jurisdictions that have fault divorce that don't want you to use the infidelity as an issue. I figured out a way to game around that. And for myself, one of the things that I did with the attorneys I worked with was I basically said, look, if we can get her to admit that she cheated, or we can find evidence to demonstrate irrefutably that she cheated, we can use that to attack her character, which also attacks her credibility. And for those people that are a little bit more knowledgeable, this is stuff they use in rules of evidence. So this is like part of the evidentiary rules that you bring to the forefront so that you can present your case, because you have to be able to not only have the evidence, but you have to be able to present it in a context in a way that the judge accepts it. In other words, in like an objective format. Is that a fair
That is,
recantation?
that is. But there's actually something that I think we should touch on here,
Go for it.
and this is one of the things. You're a paralegal. You have been for many years. I'm an attorney, and I have been for many years. One of the things that's very important, and I've had a lot of clients come in, and they've done a Google search, and they think they know this and that and the other thing. I've got a coffee mug. It's extremely explicit, and the way it puts it is, your Google search does not equal a law degree. So a lot of the time, we have people coming in. Now, if they understand that there is one of the reasons why an attorney is so useful is we're not personally invested in the outcome. We have an objective way of looking at it so that we can actually provide a clear evidence, or rather a clear weighing of the evidence that should be able to be packaged in a way where the judge will accept it and rule in your favor. When you are in the middle of it, as a client, you're going to wind up being very emotional about these facts, and you're going to have emotionally relevant facts to you that are completely irrelevant to a judge. They're not legally relevant. And that's one of the
Can I
things
jump
where,
in here and provide an
absolutely,
example?
please do.
All right. So there was an example. So like some of the work that I've done was in the state of Washington. A lot of it was, and we were in the King County Courthouse in downtown Seattle, and the courthouse was packed. Like it was Tuesday morning, motion calendar, everybody is there, and we were probably, I would say, the third on the docket. Our client was at the end, so we were at the end of the docket. But the third person in the docket, they came up there, and I don't know how this happened because both of the attorneys were seasoned, both of the attorneys were experienced, both of the attorneys were professional, but they literally spent, each of them at least, based on the oral argument, they spent at least 5 pages in their documentation and 15 minutes of the court's time litigating the best interest of a fucking cat. They were fighting for custody of a fucking cat.
Yeah.
It's Tuesday morning, you know. They've got this is mixed calendar. It's mixed motion calendar. So you've got some domestic violence. You've got some of everything, right? The judge is trying to get through it. He sees that every seat in the court is packed, and these fuckers are spending all this time on a cat. And it was fucking ridiculous. The judge was pissed, and everybody who lost from that point forward for the rest of the calendar, and I know because we were at the end, everybody from that point forward, whoever lost, the judge crucified because he was just so pissed.
Yeah. The judge was probably pretty pissed at that point.
Exactly.
Just arguing over a cat. My goodness. Some
Yeah,
people just
custody.
entirely...
They were trying to hash out visitation. They were trying.
Jesus,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
cat.
yeah, and healthcare.
I mean, if it was the best mouser on the planet, it's still not worth that much.
Right. Well, take it to China and clone it and call it a day.
Yeah, really, exactly. It'll be a feast.
I'm going to interrupt here just for a second. I'm looking at the chat a little bit. Dynamite Rabbit, I see you have a question for me. If you showed up to the stream late, and this goes for anyone else, just as a reminder, we do a presentation portion of this show. At the end of the show, we do a Q&A. If you're in on a computer desktop or you're in Twitch TV, you'll see Bukkake choke slams float across your screen. You'll see a small box on the right-hand side every so often. It'll be gray with my icon. You click it. You can redeem those choke slams, and you can write up a question, and that question will be logged, and I'll answer it during the Q&A in the order that they come in. Now, if you are like on a mobile device or you're on Roku, you're not going to be able to do that. And so then at that point, we'll use the brackets question, who the question is to, and then type out your question from there. So I just want to make sure that you'll go from there to get those questions answered, and then we'll kind of go from there. I don't really pay much attention to the chat during this because I'm focused on the conversation, but I saw that question bracket came up and go from there. And if you've got comments definitely to make to me or direct to me, please do it at the end of the stream so that there's no unnecessary distractions. So with that in mind, I apologize, MGTOW Esquire. Go ahead and continue on.
No worries. I'm afraid I've derailed my train of thought on that subject.
That's okay. So we were,
we were talking about relevance and the importance of actually having an attorney. Now, the funny thing about that is, and you and I spoke about this. One of the things that we discussed is there are three types of attorneys. There's a very very idealistic attorney who just wants to help people by using the law. Another one would be somebody who just loves the legal procedure and the gamesmanship of being an attorney. Those two categories of attorney are very helpful, and they are useful. They will get you a good result. The last category is the worst of all. That's the one that, because the practice of law can be lucrative, they will bill you for every second that you spend with them. If you get an attorney like that, some of them have to. Some of those first two categories, if they're not the boss and they don't own the practice, they don't have as much control over it, so they may have to bill every second of every day. But if you get one that's just going to charge you and they're only looking for money, you're going to wind up with a pretty crappy result. And at the end of the day, you may not be very happy with your attorney. I encourage, if there's any, this is one of the things I think you said you had as a paralegal's eye view of the way to determine what type of attorney you're dealing with. If you can throw that in here, this would be a real good time to throw it in.
Yeah, yeah, and we can kind of, instead of doing like a law clinic section, let me just throw that in there right now. So one of the things that I talk about is how to be a client, and this is the most important piece because a lot of what I did was interview clients who don't have any legal background at all. My goal was to pull out the legally relevant facts from their narrative, and then form like a bare bones legal argument to present to the attorney to give him an idea of both my thoughts of the case and of the facts and of the client, but also if he's got any additional insight, which usually, if any attorney worth their salt will, um, and they'll bring up questions that maybe I missed, or things that might be more relevant that nobody's thought about. So having that piece there. So when you're talking to an attorney, one of the first things you want to focus on is when you call them on the phone, find out what kind of law they do. The people that are like specializing in family law, don't give them any more weight than you would give any other kind of attorney, because I can tell you right now that some of the people who are the most respected people in the family law sector are some of the worst litigators out there when it comes to classic litigation. You can litigate circles around them and everything else. And I actually was fortunate enough to have some really good mentorship. And one of the attorneys that I will always respect, he was a criminal law attorney, and he was a pro tem judge, and he was a fantastic defense attorney. He could walk into a case and skim the file for 45 minutes and then go litigate it, having never seen it before, as though he'd been on the case for 6 months. And one of the things that he said was is that a lot of these attorneys, they have their career, and again, it's like you were saying, they're there for the money, and he's like, and they've been under a rock their entire career. And what I mean by that is that any attorney that you want to potentially hire, they need to know the rules of evidence. They need to know how to present those rules of evidence. Obviously, they want to know the court procedures. Some attorneys don't. Like if there is an attorney new to the area, there might be nuances of the court procedure they don't know. But I think that for myself, one of the most important pieces of getting an attorney in a family law case as a man is to have an attorney who not only knows family law, but they need to know criminal as well. Because 9 times out of 10 in family law, as a man, you will be accused of abuse. Now,
Yes.
it could be emotional abuse. It could be all kinds of different kinds of abuse, and you have to know an attorney. You have to be able to have an attorney who knows how to navigate those waters and understands the ramifications. Because I get pissed off when I see you walk into domestic violence calendar, right, and the mom is there with her court-appointed domestic violence advocate and her free attorney that somebody gave her from some feminist organization. The dad shows up. He doesn't have an attorney at all. And the judge is like, okay, well, we're having this domestic violence hearing. They get her piece. She's under oath. They swear him under oath. They never tell him that he's being accused of a crime. They never give him his right to remain silent, or his court-appointed attorney. And even though it's a civil case, he's being accused of a crime. The facts constitute a crime in which he can go to jail. They never tell him that whatever comes out of his mouth can be used against him in a criminal proceeding. So if he puts his foot in his mouth because of his legal ignorance and the emotional trauma, what ends up happening is that then they can go through, and it's almost a slam dunk on the criminal side, and there's either he's going to jail or he's got probation or whatever, but he's fucked for life because that goes on his
Correct.
criminal record. So
Yeah, and it is a travesty
it
what's
absolutely
been
is.
going on by unifying domestic violence and family court.
It absolutely is. Absolutely. And so
Because
go ahead.
well, it's basically exactly as you said, because there's so many people who believe they don't have a right to an attorney, because the men typically make more money than women. They wind up, they're paying child support, they're paying spousal support in some cases, and as a consequence, they haven't really got two nickels to rub together to hire an attorney. But their income prohibits them from getting some of the legal aid societies, which are generally predominantly run by feminists anyway. And as a consequence, these men are unrepresented, and they're hosed. They get hosed because they wind up basically testifying to some of the most bogus charges that, if they're spun the right way on the other side, constitute crimes.
Right, and that's the other thing too is that this plays on a man's weakness. Men want to solve the problem, and if you're two men and you have an issue where you're trying to communicate something or you're trying to negotiate your way through an area where you disagree, men want to talk, they want to give, they want to negotiate, they want to do that. This is not the feminist or your ex's goal. Her goal is to crucify you. And if and she's looking to go scorched earth. And if she's looking to go scorched earth, you have to understand that the American legal system is an adversarial system. And the perfect analogy of this is a gladiatorial. Two people walk
Absolutely.
in, one person walks out. Now, the
Well,
question is whether or not the person who loses is a dead body, or whether or not you give them forgiveness. Now, as a man, obviously, we want to try to give forgiveness where we can. But again, that goes back to the statement where MGTOW Esquire was talking earlier about you have to destroy her credibility enough so you're not getting dragged into court every 6 months because she just can't shut the fuck up.
exactly. And it's interesting you put it that way. There's a couple different pieces to the idea of it being gladiatorial combat. The actual origins of our legal system. I mean, while a lot of it's Western world, there are pieces of it that come from, well, I guess this is Western world, Scandinavian countries. You can see it in even the History Channel's very fanciful recreation of Vikings. At the very opening episode, they have something called a thing, which is the origin of the word thing in our language, um, where the tribe, the clan gets together and they hash out legal disputes. And oftentimes, when there's a dispute, they will have two warriors fight on behalf of the people who have the dispute. And that's where the origins of representative or advocacy come from. So it very much was gladiatorial combat back in the day.
Right. Well, and that's yeah, exactly. And so I the thing that I want to touch on too, and this is kind of going back to a previous topic that we discussed before we kind of the tangent led us here. So one of the things that I did when I worked as a professional was I looked at that in the infidelity. 9 times out of 10, infidelity is an emotionally relevant fact. However, in law, it's all about context. You can turn that into a legally relevant fact, again, by showing that she's dishonest, by showing she has a history of dishonesty, but more importantly, if there are children involved, and this is something I've seen CPS do with great success. If the woman is promiscuous, like say she's a party girl and she's binge drinking, and remember, even if she only drinks once every 6 months, she thinks she doesn't have a problem, but that's considered a binge alcoholic if you really want to look at therapeutic terms. That's the reality. So
Yeah.
if she's a binge drinker, if she drinks occasionally, if she's a party girl, if she's promiscuous, those are very common signs of cluster B disorders, like bipolar and things like that. And this is something I've got into a lot on the TFM show. But you can use that to create space and to give yourself room to negotiate and to argue with your ex in court through your attorney. And basically kind of work that angle a little bit. And MGTOW Esquire, can you kind of touch on that a little bit?
Well, one of the interesting things you said, there's a we were talking about domestic violence and how when you're not represented on the other side, you have no one spinning facts. And that's where men with domestic violence context get screwed, because while the infidelity angle is a emotionally relevant fact, it can be made a legally relevant fact by properly presenting the package of data that's going to the judge. And that's what DDJ is talking about. And that's what a lot of men would benefit from, is to have an attorney package that stuff and provide that information to a judge with some applicable case law to say, this is behavior that is consistent with cluster B disorder. Cluster B disorder is, a good piece of evidence to say this person's a really bad actor.
Right.
And while a therapist might look at it and go, oh, that's not really that strong. A judge isn't a therapist, and if you package it just right, you will get the same kind of effect in the legal system that the unfortunate guy who has no attorney and is in domestic violence, while the other side has an attorney packaging data and putting it through the judge to crucify the guy, you're going to wind up being able to turn the tables by doing this kind of stuff. And that's really the objective. And you were extraordinarily kind when you said that uh, most women are looking to crucify. I think it's pretty much in a divorce or family law context. They are all looking to crucify
Oh
their
yeah, it's
ex.
definitely, yeah. You're right. It's, I mean, they go scorched earth. They say they don't, and they play on the man's emotions and the fact that he still loves them. And then while he is got his guard down, they are bending over and fucking him. No dinner, no movie, and they go in dry.
Absolutely. The
I,
the only
yeah,
ones the only ones that don't fuck men in court have never even bothered to go to court. They're the ones who actually speak to the man, and they never involve a lawyer. They never involve a judge. They don't ever file a petition. There are women like that. They do
right,
exist. Not many of them.
right.
Most women will look for a white knight to save the day.
Well,
Most,
and
almost all of them will.
let me kind of touch on that too. Um, it's been my experience that the attorneys are fanning the fire on a lot of these women. So a lot of women will go to the attorney, and the attorney will tell her you should do this, and she won't want to, but she'll do it because her attorney told her to, and that gives her
Correct.
kind of like permission to be a cunt.
Exactly.
So
Well,
so
it's something you and I talked about before. It still amazes me that law schools are churning out these emotional thinking attorneys. It's because, and I think you're right. Although my attribution of the origin of that is to Judge Bork, the guy who didn't make it onto the Supreme Court. He wrote a book called The Political Seduction of the Law, and I believe that's exactly what's happened. Is we've got these social justice warriors that are teaching in law schools and producing these emotional thinking attorneys.
I would agree with that completely, and I've run across a lot of those attorneys as well, and that's why I wanted to touch on the whole using infidelity, using the science, using the psychology to gain an advantage, or to, I should say, to return an advantage and to mitigate the
Yes,
damage in divorce court. Because a lot of the advantages, I like to think of it as this. So because I have a martial arts background, I like to think of it as this: you have me right where I want you.
exactly.
And it's a very jujitsu mindset, right?
Well,
The
and
guy's on his back, but he's got the guy in a triangle, and the guy on top is trying to create the advantage, and he can't do it because that jujitsu person has got that defense up.
exactly. Well, the interesting thing is, and this is something that a lot of men need to understand. Just because you have the advantage, because you've got an attorney doing, your thing, doing his thing, helping you and massaging the data and getting it all packaged and ready to go, doesn't mean you need to slaughter and scorched earth the other side. But it's kind of like mutually assured destruction. If you let them know we've got you, then you can sometimes get them to dismiss their own damn case and go away. And
Right,
then you just keep that package ready to go should she be stupid or crazy enough to bring it up. That's when you let loose.
right. And if you have an
Having
attorney,
having ammunition and not using it is perfectly acceptable.
well, yeah,
But
I mean,
have the
obviously, never
ammunition.
use 20 bullets if two are good.
Exactly. That's just wasting ammo.
Right. And to touch on what you said some more, one of the things that we have done is said, look, we don't want to fight you. We want to settle this case, but you're being difficult. So we actually have a counter argument to make. Here's what it is in broad strokes. Now, it's
Yeah.
my understanding that even if this goes to trial, this is going to increase your costs of litigation a lot, even if you win. Is that a fight you want to have? Because everybody comes out with a black eye, or we can continue to be adults and resolve it. And you're right. A lot of these attorneys, when they actually look at the facts and you give them a week or two to review the case, they're like, shit, that's not
Yeah.
good.
Exactly. And the other thing, but in the family law context particularly, men typically have to pay for an attorney of their own, and women don't. So what you do is you need to hit them. You need to get the data and everything ready to hit them where it hurts. You have to destroy their. You have to have facts and data and evidence marshaled to hit them where it hurts, because they're not paying for their attorney. So the idea is to produce uh, ammo that's going to get the other attorney to realize the amount of work they're going to have to do is going to destroy their practice, because they'll be just busy putting out fires in this case, or it's going to be something that's going to be a socially unacceptable fact coming out about the woman who's crazy. Um, I've had cases where paternity was an issue, and we had obvious evidence that basically says this woman with 4 kids, 3 of which were, I'm sorry, all, what was the expression, the way I put it? Uh, 4 kids with 4 different men, and it was all pinned on one guy. And that's the type of socially unacceptable fact this woman did not want coming out. And that was the way we were able to get that case to go away, because she really didn't want her social count of men she's been with to be out in the open.
Well, sure, because for every kid that she had, you already know that that's miles of the cock carousel. So
Correct.
absolutely.
And it basically proves exactly who she really is.
Right.
And most people don't want the truth about themselves to come out, and that's one of the things that's the angle of attack that sometimes you will need to use just to get crazy women to behave themselves and not hurt you.
Right. Let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. I want to touch on, and I think this is an important issue for men, is how to be a client, how to talk to an attorney, and what are the things you should
Absolutely.
look for. And then obviously, as I touch on points, we'll go back and forth, and you can kind of add your perspective from an attorney perspective, because you obviously have to deal with the clients at the end game. So
Yes.
one of the things that I think that's important, and I said this before, and I'll say it again because it bears repeating. If you're in a family law situation, whether it's domestic violence, a paternity, child support, post-divorce modification, any attorney that you hire should have criminal experience, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these a lot of these litigations, they have multiple streams of legal issues that cross over, and so especially if you have an attorney who knows some bankruptcy, because bankruptcy is very common next step after the end of a divorce. So you have to be
Correct.
able to know how to put your life back together and know how, what that process looks like so you can create a plan. The second thing is that when you're talking to the attorney, if you ask the attorney a question and he says, "Here's my answer," and it's a stupid answer or it's a overly ambiguous answer, ask him for the legal reason why. Now, what you're asking him for is to cite the law, in other words, the statute that's on the books, or you're asking him to cite the procedure, in other words, the culture in the courthouse of that particular, because every courthouse is its own culture. And so some things that are acceptable to do, some techniques, some arguments in a certain courthouse are acceptable in one courthouse, but they're completely unacceptable in another one. So knowing the culture of the courthouse is important.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
the local rules.
right, the local rules, exactly. And then the third piece is the case law. In other words, how have the appellate courts or how have the upper courts ruled on this? Because those binding case opinions are absolutely important, because courts can strike down laws, courts can strike down rules, courts can affirm them. So you might have a fantastic argument, but having an attorney who doesn't know how to do that three-prong legal search of looking at the procedure, the statute, and the case law, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So if he just says, "Well, that's just the way it is," that's not the attorney for you. You want him to
Right.
explain why.
Yeah. And if you're paying them particularly, you want to be able to get a good solid answer as to legally why. The
Y-
other element that you didn't bring up, this is another thing that touches on the Google search, layman attorney, layman who believe they're attorneys just because they did a Google search. Google searches are great to give you a basic idea of the area of law that you're talking about. But one of the things that invariably comes out once you start drilling down into the law is these cases that have been overturned.
Mm-hmm.
There's a legal type of software called it's shepherdizing. Lexis and
Yeah,
Westlaw, these tools, they
Westlaw
both
does it.
have it.
Lexus does it. Yeah, you
And it's
shepherdize the
basic.
cases. Yeah.
Yeah. And a Google search isn't going to get updated to reflect the fact that, yeah, well, that case has been overturned for 5 years or even
Well,
even
Google doesn't
two
even
months.
Google doesn't even index those cases.
No, they don't. So as a consequence, your Google search may tell you that, yeah, that's illegal and I can do that. But the truth of the matter is it's not, because that case was overturned, and you're not going to know. Or worse, that one case that you're relying upon has been negatively treated by the last 6 judges and it's waiting to be overturned.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, you want to know what precedent you're relying on, and you will not know that as a layman.
And
And
I want to
the
touch on
legal
that.
system, it's very unfortunate, but the legal system is so labyrinthine and complicated that without a law school degree and knowing where the tools are to go and find the information you need, you're really going to be left swinging, in the breeze alone, and that's the worst position to be in.
And that's why you absolutely need an expert. And there's another piece that I think it's important to touch on too. You might find a piece of family law in Indiana that immediately matches your case and everything there, but you're in Oregon.
Right.
That Indiana case, it doesn't apply. Or like in Washington State, where I live, we have three appellate jurisdictions. We have Division One, Division Two, and Division Three, and in each one of those jurisdictions, the case law is different. So
Right.
what might work in Division One may not work in Division Three, and the Supreme Court for the state hasn't weighed in on it yet to kind of unify or to solve those contradictions. So they're going on their different direction until that case is there. So I think that that's important as well. But I also think too, and this is something that maybe it's a little bit too nuts and bolts for the layman, but my suggestion is that if you're entering into one of these cases and you're interviewing the attorney, you should be considering to prepare for the appeal the second that you enter the case.
Correct.
Because and if you get an attorney who says, Mr. Jones, do you want to make the record or do you want to win? Your answer should be both.
Both. Exactly.
And I'll tell you why. And I've gone into this before, and it's important to go into it again. I did some work with the Washington Appellate Project, and they represent indigent clients. Many of them are men who can't afford an attorney, or they were men who at the trial court level couldn't afford attorneys, so they got a court-appointed attorney. And one of their biggest complaints to me was that they could not defend these men at the appellate court level. And the reason they couldn't is because they never objected, they never made the record, they never challenged anything the other side said, and they never challenged the judge's ruling to preserve their defense. You see, you can waive your defenses by just shutting the fuck up, pulling your pants around your ankles, and saying nothing. And you don't want to do that. And you don't want an attorney who has no litigation experience, who cannot handle themselves in court. They have to be able to make the objections. Now, they don't have to be a dick about it. It could be something as simple as saying, Your Honor, I understand you've already made your decision. I just want to make sure that my objection is lodged for the record. And then the judge is going to ask you.
The other thing is, the litigation experience will teach you this. The objections need to be made is the beginning, the first time evidence comes in that shouldn't be coming in. The objection needs to be made then,
Right.
Which means you need to be objecting during a deposition.
Mm-hmm. You object during deposition. You object when you receive. If you receive a pleading that you don't like, that objection needs to be lodged in your counter pleading.
Correct. It needs to be lodged at every single step of the way. And whether an objection is overruled by the judge doesn't matter. You want it on the record.
Yeah, and just as important with that, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that I have done is that in the pleadings that I prepare in response, not only do I do the objection when the initial piece of bullshit comes forward, I reiterate the objection every time it comes.
That's correct.
And then
it seems hopelessly redundant. And I've
Right.
had laymen who worked for me, working on proofing, because one of the first things they do is they proof some of my legal documents to get their feet wet. And it's always funny when it comes, that's kind of redundant. You're repeating yourself. Well, yeah, that's kind of the way law works. There's a lot of redundancy in law.
Yeah, welcome to legalese.
Keep saying it's the way it works.
Right.
I mean, it's the funny thing is, and it's a historical fact again, and I'm going to segue because history interests me.
Go for it.
Everybody always wonders, why is it last will and testament? Well, it's because we have Germanic roots and we have Latin roots. Testament is Latin. Will is Germanic. England was raided. It was what century is it? Okay, we're being raided by the Norman now. That's how that stuff comes about, and the legal system reflects that. We were talking earlier how the legal system is downstream from politics, and politics is downstream from culture. And that is reflected throughout the history, and that's been the way it has always been. And that's the legal system is very, very set in its ways, and it takes some serious change at the cultural level to hit the political level and then hit the legal system.
Right. We were joking earlier, and I said that the law is where society goes to die.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The more legalistic a society, the more hidebound and just impossible. It becomes impossible to do anything, and we're fast approaching that point.
I would agree completely. And so the point that can't be stressed enough is this: you need to have a legal expert who knows what they're doing. And so when you're questioning that person, and if he can't give you a good reason or he can't explain it to you, and he just tries to give you generic statements or platitudes to shut you up, that's not the attorney for you. That's a guy who MGTOW Esquire talked about earlier about he's just there for the money. He's there to
Right.
collect a paycheck, and he wants your $3,000 retainer or your $5,000 retainer. Once that retainer is gone, he will file his notice of withdrawal, and he's going to leave you hanging to dry. Um,
Yeah. A good
so
attorney will have a refundable or true retainer where they're not going to keep the money if they don't earn it.
right,
Those are the ones, if you got an attorney he's gonna basically, the only point the retainer is there for is to make sure that, he gets paid at the end once he's done all the work. That's a kind of attorney you want. Somebody who's all he's doing, the only reason the retainer is there is to make sure that, when the client doesn't need him anymore, he's still going to get paid. The point is the bill gets paid. That way the attorney can actually keep functioning and representing people.
right.
Uh, a retainer that's a true retainer, and you pay into the return. You're basically prepaying the legal fees. And if you decide you're going to dismiss your case and you don't want to go forward with it, he'll refund everything. That's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And to go back to kind of like how to be a client. The thing about men
Mhm.
is that the more testosterone you have, the less you're going to want to seek help from other people. The more you're going to isolate, and
That's true.
they've done studies on this. So understand that. Get the attorney early. Don't think you can do it yourself. Get the attorney early so that you have him in place, because an ounce of prevention is definitely better than a pound of cure, always.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I've had more cases where men call me, and they want to get started on their case, and what they do is I get the initial consult, or the initial consult, when it comes time to get the initial consult scheduled, they say things like, well, I've got court tomorrow. That's too late. The proper time to start consulting an attorney is when you think your spouse is going to do something to you, just to get the evidence marshaled.
I would agree with that completely. And that it's extremely important. And I will say this. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to puff my head up too much, but I actually made it my specialty to turn the ship upright because so many men were coming in too late. So they're
Right.
$30,000 into another attorney. The other attorney didn't help them, and they're like, "Well, here's the help I need," and they're fucked. They're just fucked. So I'm like, "All right, well, this is what it's going to cost. This
Yeah.
is the attorney and I would get together, and we'd sit down, the three of us, and be like, look, this is what it's going to cost. This is what we're going to try to do, with the understanding there's no guarantees. And here's the problems, and here's the bleeding we have to stop right now. Here are the fires we need to put out." And then
Right.
at that point, they would be like, "Yeah, absolutely." And once you give men that kind of plan, and once men understand that straight talk, I think it's good. But the thing that as a client, you have to understand is that you have to be able to articulate your case. You have to learn what's called the 30-second elevator speech to give the attorney
Yes.
what they need to be interested. More importantly, though, your attorney is your legal advisor. He is not your emotional tampon. He's not. You know I'm
Yes.
right. How
I
many times
I
do a
do.
client call you up and they just start fucking bullshitting about nothing? And it's no
Yeah.
disrespect to them.
You
They're
know,
traumatized. They're going
it
through it.
isn't. It isn't. And
Yeah,
that it's true. It's true. It's one of the reasons why an office with a paralegal is exactly the right place, because a paralegal, their time, it's less expensive. I mean, you really don't want to be paying for a $250 or $500 an hour therapist to listen to you ramble on about your case. What you really want to do is fix it. And part of the problem, and part of every legal professional needs to do, is sift through facts and get legally relevant facts, or emotionally relevant facts that can be turned into legally relevant facts. And what you really don't want is, she was mean to me. That's really doesn't move the bar in any direction. And a lot of times when clients come in, they vomit all this emotional data, and while I feel for them, I really do, it doesn't help me help them.
well, and it
And
creates
that's
more problems than what it solves because now you have to sift through all the additional bullshit.
right. I mean, we know everybody has a horrible ex-spouse. That's the way it always works.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, the objective, and this gets back to another thing that's very helpful for clients. It's a decent, flawed, but decent analogy for what an attorney actually is. An attorney, especially one with a litigation background, is very much like a handgun, that the clients provide the ammunition. If the client comes in with no facts, no legally relevant facts, that's an unloaded gun you're pointing at the other side. You really want to provide, good, solid evidentiary facts that will get you to the conclusion you want, and you want to tell the attorney when to fire and what to fire.
And I also want to say something else, and this is a huge mistake that men make, and I want to dovetail what you're just saying. Um, those facts should not rely on you. If you're the ex-husband, if you're the father, if you're the man in the case, you need to make sure that your facts are independently verifiable, because the first thing that they are going to do is they're going to say, oh, he's angry, he's abusive, he's dishonest, he's whatever. You need to make it so that you could be the most dishonest piece of shit in the world, but your facts are irrefutable.
Well, it gets back to something that you guys have been bringing up on streams before many times. If you suspect your spouse is cheating, for the love of God, don't chase them around and don't stalk them.
Right.
Hire a PI. I realize it's expensive to do that, and it's sometimes it's cost prohibitive. But the truth of the matter is, you want to try and find a war chest, put together a war chest, and then hire a PI so that you can actually prove it. And then there's avenues open to you. There's the argument of you, instead of going the ridiculous route of no fault divorce, which has been a clusterfuck since the day it was enacted, uh, into infidelity as the basis. That gives you much more leverage as you go forward.
And I'll tell
A
you
lot
what,
of
it terrifies the other side.
Absolutely. Well, because it gets, one of the reasons why it's so terrifying is because you are revealing a private fact in open court, and it just decimates the other side. Just the fact that you can prove it puts them on the defensive to the point where they are going to give you a pretty darn good outcome.
Right, right.
And that's really what everybody's looking for anyway.
Mm-hmm. You
You
know,
really want to get an outcome that you can live with.
well, and I want to dovetail a little bit too on that PI. Let me, and guys, for when you're doing your cost benefit analysis, and you have friends that are going to go through divorce, because everybody's getting divorced because feminism has destroyed the social contract between men and women, and they've incentivized divorce where everybody's getting one. The thing you want to remember is this: would you rather spend $1,500 on a private investigator, or would you rather spend $150,000 on legal fees, lose your job, lose your reputation, lose your house, and potentially be put in jail? You
That's
see,
exactly right.
and I'm not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. This is
It isn't.
from the beginning of the divorce to the end of, let's just say, a 3-day trial. It is not uncommon to incur $60,000 to $80,000 in attorney debt from start to finish if it's properly litigated and the attorney is just not milking the case.
Exactly. A perfectly legitimate case can run up massive, astronomical legal fees.
Right.
And if you find the right attorney, they can find a way to help you finance that. But it's sometimes it's very tough to do. So you're going to have to start putting away. The trick is to just put away a little bit of money so you got a war chest so you can marshal the evidence to present to the attorney, and then you have a chance of getting a decent outcome.
I agree completely. Now, to go back a little bit to, how to interview your attorney and how to monitor your attorney to make sure they're doing a good job for you, in addition to knowing how to communicate with them, your attorney needs to be able to do discovery. There's so many
Absolutely.
family law attorneys, they just shit out legal pleadings and they just want to do death by a thousand motions and they just want to fuck each other in motion calendar. While that benefits the attorney, it doesn't benefit you. It doesn't benefit your children. It doesn't benefit your ex. In fact, what it does is it creates an entire broken family of victims. So you
Yes.
want to go to court as little as possible, but every time you go to court, you want to make sure you're there for a completely viable and potentially winnable reason, or at least a reason where you can defend yourself. And the best way to do that, in my view, once the case is started, is to make sure that again, this goes back to those rules of evidence that your attorney needs to know. He has to be able to issue discovery to the other side in the form of, even if you have no money. Let's say you don't have money for a deposition, because depositions can be expensive and they're time consuming.
Very, very expensive. But
Right.
there are some inexpensive tools. One
Right.
would be interrogatories.
That's where I was going.
They're frequently the most ignored tool.
Right.
For
I
the
use them
layman. For
all
the
the
layman
time.
here,
Go ahead.
discovery is, and some laymen aren't even going to know what that is. Discovery is the process by which the attorneys learn what ammunition the other side has. Uh, that way, if you're in the process of doing discovery and you unveil a really critically damning fact about your own client, at least you can advise your client not to go forward with it, because it will be crucifying them if that comes out. That's one of the things you do to settle. That's if you're on the other side. if you find out something critically damning about the other side, doing discovery will allow you to let the other side know that you've got this evidence and that you can back up the threats so that the other side might give you a decent deal and let your client out in a good resolution way.
Right.
So that's basically a quick primer on the point behind what discovery is. It's just
Right.
a method of gathering information about what the other side has.
And when he talks about the interrogatories being inexpensive, what he means is that interrogatories are sort of like subpoenas in a way. They are basically questions that you can ask the other side. The other side has to respond under penalty of perjury in writing, and you can request documents at the same time. Now, the reason that you use these is to minimize the cost of litigation, to shorten the trial, and to potentially have the evidence to settle issues so that even if you have to go to trial, you can go to trial on less issues rather than more. It makes everything cleaner, it's streamlined, it makes it less expensive in the long run, and you can solve a lot of issues before you have to deal with, death by 1,000 motions and everybody just fucking hates each other.
Yes. Another useful thing that comes out, one of the very most important reasons why discovery is so important is because almost every single pleading that comes from a woman these days includes some kind of an allegation of abuse of some type. Well, in discovery, what you put in your interrogatories is, please outline every single example and what evidence you have to back up those examples. Please, denote what exactly are you alleging here? You're saying he's violent. Well, give me some examples. What did he do? And oftentimes there isn't any example.
Right. Well, and let me give you another example too of how I was able to use discoveries in one of my divorces to entertaining effect. We did I do shotgun discovery. So a lot of attorneys, they try to do minimal discovery, but like my first set of interrogatories usually includes about 150 questions and about 80 document requests. Because, nothing says fuck you like fuck you. So
yeah, really.
I have a template and I shit on her. I shit it all over her.
I really
attorney.
wouldn't mind seeing that template. I swear that's some useful stuff.
It asks about everything. Well, one of the things it asks, because what it does is you want, it's like circles of the onion. You start at the outer layer and you peel in, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this is the first outer layer. So I shot it over to them, and one of the things I asked them was for their bank records. They're like, yeah, no problem. So they shot me the bank records, they shot me the paycheck stubs, they shot me the stuff, and she said she was earning a certain amount of money. She said she was, and then she had her financial declarations that said, I paid this much for rent. The attorney put in their financial declaration because they wanted fees from me, of course. And the attorney said that, they incurred this amount of fees and that they had, a certain amount of money that was already spent. So I reconciled her bank statements with what the attorney said with her financial declaration. And what I found was that there was no money coming from her bank account to pay rent. There was no money coming from her bank account to pay the attorney. So I was able to take this discovery and go, look, here's the discovery. I contacted the other side and I said, well, we have a little bit of a discrepancy because either I'm going to add these amounts that are not coming out of your bank account as individual income for purposes of child support and everything else, or you're going to tell me where this money comes from because it sounds like you've got a sugar daddy who's paying for your way.
Exactly.
And they lost their fucking mind. And here's the other thing. When I looked at the bank statements, she had online accounts. So in addition to the bank statements, she had like when Google Wallet she was dumping money in Google Wallet and those transactions were recorded. So she never provided me the Google Wallet account, so she was concealing information. So I was like, look, I told the judge, I was like, look, she's concealing money. She's hiding money. She's defrauding the court. She's under oath requirement to answer this stuff, and she's not doing this. And I can show where she's getting money, but she's not actually earning that money. So that money's coming from somewhere. So she's either got another job, and I was like, and I don't understand what it is. I don't know if she's an escort. I don't, because you can say that shit in court if you do it right.
You can.
And, and of course I'm straight faced and you want to be like really diplomatic when you say it. And you're like, Your Honor, I don't know if she has another job. I don't know if she's an escort or a webcam girl or what. But
exactly.
But the money's coming from somewhere. And then they get offended. They're like, I take exception for you saying she's a cam girl. And I'm like, well, it is an online account and this is within the realm of possibility given her history. And they just
they lose their mind.
They lose their mind. And the judge was entertained because they don't ever see this.
No,
but that's why
if
you
you could
do
present something that's going to make the judge laugh,
exactly.
that makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
another thing you touched on, but this is something that's
Go
actually
ahead.
really useful to know. The financial discovery is key because a lot of these women, when they get into family court, they're represented by a legal aid society, so they're not actually paying for the attorney, right? And if they've actually got a job and they've actually got income that they lied about, and once that income comes out, the other side, the legal aid person, is going to have to withdraw, so they're going to wind up unrepresented and paying for their own attorney.
Right.
That is something you want to have them do because they do not want to be paying money for an attorney in the family law context when they had previously a free attorney. You don't want to be the only guy who's got legal fees in the case. And if you
Right.
do the financial discovery, and I realize it's expensive to do discovery, but it's important to do it.
It's
Without the
required.
discovery, you're going in blind.
Right. Right. And I'm gonna add one more piece to that that's just as important. For all you guys out there whose ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or whatever, you broke up and she moved in with her boyfriend, she moved in with her parents, or she moved in with somebody else, the laws in almost every state, and again, you're going to want to talk to an attorney about this just to verify it, but I know it's true in Washington, and in MGTOW Esquire, you can talk to me if it's in California and New York. One of the things that is there is that when you're doing financial disclosure, they require household disclosure, not your income.
Correct.
Let me say it again. It is household income disclosure, not yours. So if she's living with her parents and she's not paying rent, or even if she is paying rent, she has to include her parents' financials. If she got a boyfriend, she's got to include the boyfriend's financials. There was a case in Washington, probably in Washington State, it was probably 15 years ago now, where the wife got custody of the kids. The wife wasn't working. Now, if they're not working, it's called voluntarily underemployed or potentially voluntarily underemployed. You can impute income to her for purposes
Correct.
of child support. Now, again, talk to an attorney about it just to make sure you get the nuts and bolts of it. I'm just kind of putting the seed in your head for questions to ask a professional.
Absolutely.
So this woman refused to work. She was, for all legal intents and purposes, she was considered voluntarily underemployed. The man was paying child support, and she was living with and fucking a Microsoft millionaire. And living in the lap of luxury, one blowjob at a time. And
Exactly.
Right? And so he was like, why do I have to fucking pay this shit? I'm in the poorhouse and I'm barely, paycheck to paycheck. And one thing leads to another, and this isn't fair. And so I need to have a child support deviation down because this other guy has all this money. Well, they fought about it. It went to the appellate court, and the Court of Appeals said that, yeah, you have to use the household income, so you have to consider the Microsoft millionaire's massive assets, and he has to disclose them, even if they're not married, because she receives benefit from that.
Correct.
And
one of the things you said that was so critically important is the financial disclosures. If you've gotten the financial disclosures in place, reconcile them so that you can actually, because the lady who's fucking a Microsoft millionaire, her financial data is going to be very hard to reconcile. She's not going to have expenses for things that she should and must have.
Right.
And the fact that those pieces of evidence are missing is relevant to the judge, and that's something you're going to want to be able to put before them. So it really cannot be understated. It can't be overstated, the importance of discovering and knowing what the other side has and making use of the data that you do get.
Well, and that's one of the things that, it goes back to the old adage, liars always lie. So if you know that she's a lying cunt, and on her financial declaration she says she's paying $1,500 a month for rent, but her bank statement shows she's not, she's lying. And because she had to put that declaration in under penalty of perjury, now all of a sudden you have effectively attacked her character. So come trial, when you have her under cross-examination, you can be like, here you go. So let me give you another example. So like I did my discovery, we were in trial. Under direct examination, she kept on trying to tell everybody or tell the judge that I was keeping her from visiting the children because I had custody, and that I was interfering with custody. It's like somehow I was bad. So she had documented every time she had seen the children on like some notes, right? She made her own little journal. So I took her journal, and I already knew what the answer was. I facilitated transportation. I was the one who made sure the visitations happened. So you get her on cross, you start out slow, and then you start dialing in. So I looked at her journal as I'm going through the documents, and I was like, so who facilitated these visitation days? And she's like, oh, well, you did. I said, well, who provided transportation to? You did. Who provided transportation from? Oh, you did. And if there was any scheduling issues, um, how was that resolved? And then she would talk about how we would talk on the phone and resolve that. And I said, well, with that in mind, it's clear that what you're telling me now contradicts what you said before. So I guess for the court, could you clarify which is the lie?
Yes, that's very important to bring that out.
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff that gives you a win.
It does. And you want to be able to show that they are contradicting themselves. Again, choose your words with good taste. You may have to eat them. And again, you can't do any of this without discovery, without interrogatories, without an attorney who knows the rules of evidence, and without a legal expert who is vested in your corner. And I hope that when I upload this to YouTube, people can use this as a primer and share it with others to give them some, at least some semblance of what the types of things you can do to protect yourself, and to kind of get the old get the old brain moving a little bit, because again, Google searches aren't going to do it, and MGTOW Esquire is absolutely correct, but it'll give you a little bit of the vocabulary so that you can at least start the conversation, and hopefully the attorney that you choose will provide you some education in the process, in addition to what you may learn here or what you may take away from this conversation as well.
Yeah, these are all things that the objective here is to make sure that because women have all these in uncountable organizations helping them. Men have virtually nothing. So having these resources available to men, and if other attorneys are going to look at this and comment, as long as we get some dialogue and conversations going about this, and hopefully we can get some decent results and get some of the other attorneys that are out there stepping up their game and trying to help these men instead of just taking their money and meandering through family court and generating these awful results for people. It's important for people to understand these things, because the legal system, you've always heard the axiom, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, it's true, ignorance of the law is no excuse. The tough part is the law has become so labyrinthine that you're never going to know all of it. Even in one area, it's becoming a complete 100% expert in something, you're still going to come up with things that you just don't know. There's too much data to become completely versed in any one area.
And you bring up an important point. I mean, the only reason that I won my case, like the first case that I talked about in DDJ's Inferno, well, even a second case, was because I knew that there was nothing I could do to stop them from destroying my life. So I decided that, knowing that, I would start focusing on getting the legal knowledge I needed to protect my kids.
Exactly.
So
that's when you've got nothing to lose.
Right.
You're a pretty dangerous opponent.
And that's exactly what it was. But the reason I bring this up is not for everybody to become a legal expert. It's because you need to do something. If you're in a divorce, if you are, you're going through some kind of family law issue, that shit's stressful. And you have to continue moving forward, because if you focus on it and you can't, and you don't do anything, and you're just sitting at home and you're upset and you're drinking and you're depressed, all that's going to do is create more problems than it's going to solve. So you have to make sure that you are, engaged in work, or engaged in your career, engaged in your social circles, and that you're not alienating people around you, and you have that social support, that financial support, and that you keep those relationships strong. Because the biggest challenge is, and this is where a lot of men, I mean, divorce is one of the largest indicators of whether or not a man commits suicide. So
Correct.
It's important to be able to have things in your life worth living for beyond that. And I think the biggest mistake that people make, especially men, is that everybody tells men that when a marriage breaks up, that it's the man's fault. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case.
Not even close.
Just not even close. If your marriage breaks up, or your relationship broke up, or whatever, it had nothing to do with you most of the time, unless you're like an actual DV perp, or you're an actual pedophile, you're a violent asshole. You guys, yeah, that's your fucking problem. But for the rest of the people, for the majority of the people, you can't control whether or not she's a slut. And she's probably gaslighted you. She's probably broken down your defenses. And you might have been an alpha male at one point. You might have been a strong, competent, capable male. but she just broke down your defenses and psychologically abused you, took advantage of you, and then cheated on you and destroyed you on the way out the door. That's not your fault. But at the same token, you need to rebuild your life, and all you're looking to do is to protect your rights. You're not looking to destroy her.
One of the things Karen Strawn brought out way back when is the losing all roles that you actually had in life. You lost the role of father. You lost the role of husband. This is the kind of stuff that creates the perfect storm of suicide. I know TFM talks about the valley of suicide. It's very real. And that's exactly when that kind of stuff happens. It's one of those things where you can take a bad choice and just, have a bottle after bottle of Jack Daniels, and eventually it's going to kill you. But the much better productive result is to just, instead of doing that, put some money aside to create a war chest so that you can actually fight when you need to, instead of going down the time-worn path that so many men have gone down, not seeking help, not getting somebody backing them up, not having someone in their corner and trying to go it alone. And it always creates a bad result when you do that.
I agree completely. I think that this is a pretty good spot to end this conversation. And it sounds like that, obviously, we talked about this earlier, that there's so much information to go over and so much good information we can share. It's maybe sometime next year, January, February, we can get together again. And
I'm up for it.
Yeah, have another conversation, because I really feel good about the conversation. I feel good about the information that was shared. And at this point, I'm looking at the questions. Most of them are from Ethical AA right now, as ones that are logged.
Okay.
But I'm gonna open up the question and answer session right now for everybody. So if you have questions for myself or you have questions for MGTOW Esquire, go ahead and shoot them out right now. I'm gonna go through them now. I will say this: if your questions are retarded, if you're just spamming shit just because you can't shut the fuck up, I'm probably not going to answer your question. If your question is a trolley question, I'm probably not going to answer your question. If the question was already covered in the content, I might skip your question, but with the understanding, I'll let you know that we already talked about it, and then that way we don't have to deal with it at that point, because it's already been close to 90 minutes, and I want to respect MGTOW Esquire's time as well. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start with Dynamic Rabbit in the chat. Question for DDJ. I'm 55, and red pilling took decades, involving many relationships and 2 failed marriages. Just discovered the MGTOW community a year ago. I ignore middle-aged women whenever they express an interest in me. But how can a guy my age legitimately claim to be a MGTOW? It's easy. MGTOW is a philosophy, and it's a personal philosophy. I mean, you don't need like a club card or anything. You don't need to go online and, pay your dues.
There is a secret handshake that involves a sweet corn challenge, I think.
but only if you're a British cat.
Only for British cats, especially drunk ones.
Right, drunk British cats, absolutely. So there you go. All right, Ethical AA. His question is it absolutely inevitable that women will get physical custody over 90% of the time, no matter what a man does to defend himself? Actually, that number is a little bit high, Ethical AA. My research has shown that
80%.
80. And I will say this: that if you've got a good attorney, that percentage goes way up.
All right. Yeah, down actually.
Up for the guy. Sorry.
Yeah, the facts for the coming up with that statistic. I mean, you have to look at it. Men typically don't. They believe they can do everything on their own, and they try to go it alone. Well, that generates that statistic. Because men traditionally, they think they can handle themselves. They do a Google search, they try to get educated, and they really can't, because they don't have the tools at their disposal that a law officer, a law firm, or an attorney, even a sole practitioner, can provide. And as a consequence, that number, women just steamroller, because the reason they're steamrolling men is because they have these legal aid societies and they have all these feminist people helping them out. They're not going it alone. So is it inevitable? No, it's definitely not. But it's, if you follow the path everybody else seems to going down, you're going to get exactly the same result everybody else is getting, which is pretty negative.
Exactly. All right. Next question is from Filthy Pigeon. Question: evidence that is collected without the wife girlfriend's knowledge, is it admissible in court? Messages, emails, etc. Yes, it absolutely is. But the thing that you want to remember is, and again, MGTOW Esquire, you can kind of jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. You have to have it certified. And so, in other words, if you have email, for example, because of advances in the way the evidentiary rules work, you have to have the data headers because it has to be verified as a legitimate email. But if you're like cutting and pasting an email into like a Word document, you could edit that document and make that email say whatever it is you want. So they definitely want to have those certifications. And when you submit those emails, you need to submit them under penalty of perjury, because if you falsified those emails, you want to make sure that either you can be held accountable or whatever. And when it comes to like messages, like say voicemails and things like that, they have these things called court transcriptionists, and they use them to type out transcriptionists. They're basically court approved data entry specialists to transcribe audio or video or whatever. I would suggest that if you have audio recordings like voicemails, that you go and take that to a court approved transcriptionist for your jurisdiction, have them transcribe it. You're going to pay some money for it, but it's worth its weight in gold, and you can use that over and over and over again. Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add,
especially.
MGTOW Esquire?
Yeah, no, it's actually you're absolutely correct. The thing about it, and the way to remember this is to provide to make that evidence useful in court. It's very much like everybody sees these courtroom drama TV shows. There's a thing called chain of custody. It's very much like that. If you can prove that the document or the text or the email came from the person who it says it came from, then you've got an angle to bring it into court. And the headers, that's part of it. Um, the transcribing of voicemails, especially if it's a autistic screeching voicemail from the ex, that's the
Exactly.
kind of stuff that's absolutely worth its weight in gold. And the flip side of this is also true and very important to remember. Guys, seriously, texting and emails is not the place to be berating a crazy ex who's driven you to the point of just insanity. Try to be as civil as you can and don't put anything in text or email that you don't want read in open court. You got to remember that. That's very important. It's so nice to have a client who remembers that and lets the other side fly off the handle and blow up and cause all kinds of problems, because when that stuff gets read in open court, it's gold.
Well, and I want to add something to that too. So I actually don't follow that advice, but that's because I have a lot of legal knowledge. And you may have an attorney that likes to throw a hand grenade in the tent. If they like that and that's something they do, that's a legitimate tactic, but that's a tactic for the attorney. It's not a tactic for the client.
Correct.
All right, let's go to the next question. This one is from Red Rash Al Ghul. Question: my greatest fear is being accused of being physically abusive. Women have pulled this shit before. Can I walk around with a concealed microphone? I wouldn't do it, because there are jurisdictions, and I don't know how it is in like other states, but I've heard of jurisdictions in other states and even in other countries where they've adopted the Duluth model and feminist policies for family court, where that makes it where it's basically recording them surreptitiously is
That's
illegal,
correct.
and you can go to jail for it. So
Correct.
you talk to a criminal law expert there, because
Yeah.
you don't want
Find
to
a
try to
local attorney.
find a local attorney. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, I mean, the thing that I would say is this: I mean, you can't stop the accusation. You just can't. And if you think that if your goal is to prevent the accusation, that's not the goal you should be achieving. The goal that you should be achieving is mitigating the risk of having the accusation, i.e., go MGTOW. But if you're involved with a woman, you need to make sure that you have information that can be helpful later on. And so, like, if you're with a woman and you need to get your dick moisturized, find out about her. Does she have a mental health history? Does she have other, does she talk about her ex being abusive and things like that? And the reason that's important is that I worked on a case, I don't know, probably about a year and a half ago, where the guy was with this chick and she had a kid by another man. She was divorced. She had a child with him, and he was trying to do the right thing. They were trying to make a go of it. She accused him of domestic violence, and it was a false accusation. And we looked into her background and found that not only had she had a history of accusing every one of her serious exes since she was 18 of domestic violence, like there were domestic violence orders she was registering in different jurisdictions around the state, depending on where she lived. Her ex-husband not only accused her of domestic violence, she was arrested for it, and then she was arrested for violating the DV restraining order. So this is like a serial DV filer. So you need to know what the history is, and you need to be able to do your homework. So don't be so stressed about the accusation itself. Be stressed if you don't have the ability to defend yourself, because you can't control whether or not an accusation happens, but you can control what the provable evidence says.
exactly. There really is only one defense, and that's to go MGTOW. But
Yeah,
in the end of the day, knowing your enemy, it's like that old Latin motto: if you seek peace, prepare for war.
always.
It's unfortunate, but it's very true. You just have to be ready for that kind of stuff, and marshaling your resources before you need them is very important.
I would agree. All right, next question. Joe Cummings says, "What do you think of using Martindale Hubble when selecting an attorney?" Me and MGTOW Esquire might have a different opinion on this, but I'm gonna be real blunt with you. Most of these things like super lawyers, Martindale Hubble, bar association awards. These are attorneys masturbating each other.
That's
They
absolutely true.
there's no quality in any of these things. You know how you find the best attorney? You open up the phone book and you find the attorney who doesn't have an ad. The guy,
Yeah,
seriously, he has his name, there's his address, and there's his phone number, and it's a single fucking line in the phone book, or it's real minimal. Or you find an attorney who their website is very informative, but it's dog shit. The reason is because he's too fucking busy with work
yeah,
that that he doesn't need anymore. The guy who's got the full page ad in the phone book, the guy that's out there shitting his name everywhere, that's the shyster. That's the guy who's out there looking for money. The attorneys that are actually doing the work, the ones that are ethical, the ones that are the chess players and the gamesmen, and the ones that are the idealists and who care and give a shit about you, they don't have time to take more clients than what they have. And they're going to be the attorneys that are turning down clients, not because they're dicks or because they don't think they can handle your case. It's because they're fucking too busy.
yeah. The best way to actually find a good attorney is ask other people who have been with these attorneys. If you get a client, if I get a client, well, every client I've had that has had a good outcome is going to be telling everybody they know about me, and that's exactly what I want. When I get a good result for somebody, I just want them to tell the people that I'm doing it.
Right.
That's I don't have yellow page ads. Goodness gracious, and my web page, well, yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, and most of the work I've gotten has been because
I'm not
I,
a
I
web designer.
contracted case by case basis with attorneys, and I can tell you right now that the latter half of the 10 plus years I did it, it was all referral. I'd have people call me up, and I never took out an ad, and I was self employed.
Exactly right.
They find
Yeah,
you, they know what you can do, and they find your work speaks for itself.
it does. At the end of the day, that's all you got is your reputation, and it sucks because every once in a while you get a client who gets mad just because, well, they came in with a dog shit case that you can't help them, and there's no way to fix that. But you get enough clients that have gotten a great result because they came in with good facts, you marshaled the facts properly for them, and you gave them a good result. That's the way to do it.
Okay,
And
let's.
bringing it in at the right time. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna say you're absolutely right. I don't want to cut you off too much. I don't want to stay on the stream too long, but I've got
Understood.
17 questions in the queue for the actual Bukaki Chokeslam queue, and everybody has got real good questions in the chat as well. So I want to try to keep it moving. I'm basically being sober cat here.
That's prudent. One other thing.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
yeah, I'm totally open. Because if we hit a lot of questions on the same topic, the other thing is I'm perfectly up for something in January or February. Having a whole stream on a certain topic would be fine with me. So just
Right.
keep that in mind. Anyway, let's go ahead to the next
Yeah, and,
question.
and I will, and let me add that too. I'll put up I'll put up my email in Twitter, and I'll put it in the description of this video. And you'll have my email for those that need it. You'll have my email based on the YouTube channel. If you have things that you wanted to like, because we're going to do a follow up stream with MGTOW Esquire. If you have questions or subjects that we want to talk about, and enough people ask those things or say, "Hey, this subject's important to me," and enough people have that, we will shape the next stream around that for those that are interested. All right, let's move to the next question. Raising Cain question for DDJ and MGTOW Esquire. What would you see as the best way to educate younger guys on what they are really legally facing going forward to avoid potholes instead of having to deal with them? Real quickly, and then I'll turn it over to MGTOW Esquire. I'm actually creating video content for that express purpose. I wrote The Feminist Lie as a very approachable, very brief, concise book that is digestible from everybody who can share the threat. If you look at my video, Avoiding Marriage is Not Enough, or about the Duluth model video I had, both of those are very short videos that are packed with information that basically show verifiable facts and observable reality to every generation so they understand exactly what kind of feminist threat they're facing. MGTOW Esquire, you want to add to that?
Yeah, the sad truth is it's very hard to red pill. If you've got a son, it's very hard to red pill a kid because you're telling them things that are flying directly in the face of everything they're hearing everywhere else. It's no accident that there's fellows like that one questioner a little bit ago that talked about the red pill process taking 50 years. It's not surprising. It is in our DNA to seek out women, and to white knighting is it's not an accident that men white knight. It's we're supposed to take care of women. That's kind of the way it's supposed to be. Women are not supposed to be vicious harpies that rip men to pieces. That's the new thing that's been added in the last hundred or so years. Um, so in terms of red pilling, try to get them to find the tamest content. The first bit of red pill that I came across was a book by Dr. Helen Smith. The what is it? The War Against Boys. I think that's
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah,
I think it's
that is,
War Against Men,
yeah.
War Against Boys. That kind of content is very important, but it's it's like screaming in the wilderness. If it's untethered from everything else, you never know what content somebody's going to come across. So
Okay. I'm going to switch gears here and I'm going to jump into the pre-recorded questions. The plumber speaks asks, "Have you guys considered that no fault is a constitutional violation of the right to due process?" I did a long time ago, but I wasn't able to actually find any case law support to support that argument, that specific argument. But I mean, MGTOW Esquire, you want to weigh in on that?
yeah, I haven't looked into that particular area yet. It's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm much more interested in the domestic violence uh, lack of constitutional provision with regard to not having an attorney be appointed for you since it is a criminal allegation. There's a lot more meat to look at in that particular context as opposed to no fault. No fault's a nightmarish aberration, but it's just the tip of the iceberg.
yeah, I would agree that it's more of a symptom than the problem itself. All right,
Exactly.
next question. Ortigas asks, if you know she's about to start her move and make a scene dealing with police, would personal recordings be accepted in court? No. I think that the second that you think that she's about to make her move, you need to fucking pop smoke and ghost out. You need to make sure you're not in a position to allow a female to have those allegations for you. We live in a society where if you get caught one time, that's one time too many. That's one of the reasons that
Exactly.
I promote MGTOW as the solution until things change, because the system is set up to set you up. And anything that you do to protect yourself, feminists have gone out of their way to make illegal or to make sure that there's plenty of backlash so they can crucify you for trying to protect yourself. So you have to, again, being MGTOW is the way to go. And if you're already in a relationship and she starts acting that way, where she starts shit testing you and trying to instigate a domestic violence incident, you need to break up with her regardless of
Absolutely.
what it costs. You need to break up with her, because I'll tell you what'll happen is that her hypergamy is going to go. She's going to monkey branch, and then she's going to set you up and really fuck you. And let me tell you another little trick too. If you break up with her because she's batshit crazy and she's doing this, and she's not ready to fuck you over completely in court, what's going to happen is she's going to try to get back together with you. Not because she wants to fix the relationship, even though that's what she's going to tell you, but it's to collect more evidence to set you up for failure because she didn't finish it up the first time. So if you pull the trigger
Exactly.
first and you get out of there, you're going to mitigate a lot of unnecessary drama down the road. MGTOW Esquire, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, one of the things that you talk about oftentimes is ghosting in plain sight. The other thing is if you think she's getting ready to screw you over, don't be alone with her. Just don't have make sure you got lots of witnesses that are you could just hang out with a bunch of men. Don't be hanging out with her. Get away from her as fast as you can and try and keep it that way.
Right.
Don't add any more ammunition by being alone with her at all because then she's going to call the cops and she might start running into walls. So if you've got a calendar where you can keep track of where you were and you can prove it, that's the best defense you can possibly have. She'll say, "Well, he hit me at such and such a day." Well, I was at the bowling alley with my buddies drinking beer. That's if that covers the entire span of time, you're not going to have any trouble later down because you've got the evidence. But if you
Okay.
don't have that, it's he said, she said, and you've got a problem, especially if she's going to manufacture bruises and what have you.
All right. Taz the MGTOW asks question for Esquire. Has there ever been a case a lawyer has refused to take on purely because they thought it was unwinnable because the opponent in the courtroom was a woman?
I'm sure there are attorneys who've done that. I've I myself have turned down cases because the facts are unwinnable because the client comes in with a bunch of facts that are really not legally relevant. They can't even be massaged as legally relevant. Um, it would be ethically irresponsible to be taking cases and taking money from somebody if you know you can't possibly win. As far as the opponent being a woman, I've never heard of it, but I'm sure there's attorneys out there that'll do that. I'm not
Okay.
sure if that's responsive to the question, but I hope it was.
All right. Uh, Ryukurito 1, question for both. Even though a restraining order against me got dropped due to the fact that my ex wife had no evidence to hold it, I was still court ordered to see my kids through supervised visitation. What can I do? I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not an attorney, and my opinion is my personal opinion, but this is what I would do if I were in your situation personally. I would go to the court and I would request the court remove the supervision provisions because she made up the allegation against you. And you know she made up the allegation because there wasn't enough evidence to maintain it with the order. And I would basically accuse her of malicious prosecution. I would accuse her of basically acting in bad faith and falsely using a DV order against you. Now, what'll probably happen is the court will have to address it as a serious issue if you present it correctly. And frankly, I would have your attorney do it. So, this is the type of thing you definitely want an attorney for. And then what I would do is basically make the accusation to go scorched earth on her and then settle something more reasonable that removes the supervision provisions from you. Because frankly, if you're not a criminal, if you don't have a history of violence, if you're not a domestic violence perpetrator, if you're not a pedophile, there is no excuse for you as a father who has your parental rights intact to ever have supervised visitation. And that is not something that any man should ever tolerate. MGTOW Esquire, you want to weigh in on
That's
that?
correct. Well, you actually touched on the one most important thing: get an attorney. Don't try to tackle that one on your own. That's not going to be a simple, walk in and tell the court you're a good guy and that'll fix it. No, that's something that's going to be complicated. Anytime you involve the courts, you are talking a complicated mess. It's not an area for somebody not well versed in the area to try and tackle. Trying to do that alone, bad recipe for disaster.
All right. Next question is lifting 1234 for both. I am currently a college student, and I'm wondering, do you guys have any advice for combating accusations on campus? Thanks for the help and keep up the good work. I actually do. This is something that I've looked into recently, and it's also one of the reasons that I made my most recent video about avoiding relationships, not women. You have to blend into your background, and I go into this in detail in the video. But you have to blend into your background. You have to be able to make yourself uninteresting to women. Think of it as reverse game, right? So in PUA game, you're trying to go out and get her attention, to be the center of attention. The reverse is that you want to be in the background. You don't want her to pay attention to you or any of the women paying attention to you at all. But you also don't want to make statements in public or within earshot of other people that somebody may find offensive, because a lot of times what'll trigger a campus witch hunt won't be like you'll flirt with a woman and you're getting ready to give her the bukkake choke slam and she's totally down for it, but there'll be some other cunt that hears you flirting with her, and that cunt's the one who gets offended because she's just an angry feminist who can't get laid. So she's going to make the accusation against you, and that's what's going to trigger the other thing. Now the other side of it is that if you get caught up in a campus situation where you're accused of a crime, sexual assault, sexual harassment, whatever, you need to, I would, if it were me, I would exercise my Fifth Amendment right and I would request a police investigation, and I would request the college hold off any action at all until the results of the police investigation are done, because it's a crime. And if you're guilty of the crime, you
Correct.
should be prosecuted and go to jail. But if you're
Yeah,
innocent of the crime after the police does their investigation, then they should go play hide and go fuck themselves, because all it is a witch hunt.
exactly. I mean, you may wind up expelled, but expelled is a lot better than in jail.
Right.
Um,
And you can sue for the expulsion.
correct. Uh, the ghosting in plain sight. It's very important to do that. It makes it very hard to get your dick moisturized when you're doing that, but at the same time, oftentimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The It's important. If you're a student, back when I was in law school, one of the things I would do when I was going out, because I really wasn't looking for some gold digging bitch, which most of them were, was, I'd go out and people would ask me what I did. Well, I drive a cab. It's
Right.
just pick
Right.
the lowest status occupation you could possibly pick and tell them
Absolutely.
that's what you do.
Right.
Because you tell them the truth, and all of a sudden they're salivating over your resources, which
Exactly.
that's some pretty awful shit. So it
Well, that's
doesn't make it easy, but the truth of the
yeah.
matter is life's not easy.
Well, and that's why I got rid of my Audi A6 and replaced it with a Prius.
Exactly, blend in.
Blend in. Yeah. Better to have the soy mobile than the one that says, "Hey, divorce rate me." Um,
Exactly.
all right. So next question is from Master Minos. Which countries or cities are ideal to live in? God, I get this question all the time. I did a stream the other day with Elizabeth Hobson about misandry today in the UK. If you haven't seen it, it is terrifying. And the reason it's relevant is because not only is shit really bad in the UK, but Australia's adopted some of these laws. Sweden has adopted some of these laws. Canada's adopted some of these laws. And all these laws and policies very similar are being adopted all over the left coast. So Washington, Oregon, California, parts of New York, certain places. My suggestion is this: is that learn to ghost in plain sight everywhere. And once you learn to ghost in plain sight everywhere, you're going to be a lot safer no matter what. But that's just my opinion. I don't think there's, other than living in the United States, because we have a First Amendment free speech right, we have constitutional rights for the accused, and because we have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, I think that pretty much most places in the United States, other than the left coast, are probably okay. MGTOW, what are your thoughts?
The area of I mean, I agree with you. The United States, because of the First and Second Amendment and all the protections we have in the Constitution, are the best. This is the best place to be. I would further amend that by saying that basically any area that is considered flyover country would probably be the right place to be. Any of the states that are not too far on either coast and closer to the center, you're going to wind up with a better result. It's just a better place to live. It's not flashy, but you don't want flashy. You want to try and blend in, and
Okay.
that's the best place to do it.
All right. I'm going to switch gears real quick, and we're going to go back to the pre-recorded questions. Question from Ethical AA for the guest. If a man smells a divorce coming, how can he use recording technology to protect himself, and what should he record most of all?
Now, recording technology is fraught with peril. It's going to depend on the individual jurisdiction that you're in. Some jurisdictions are very, if there's a one-party consent state, you're in good shape. If it's a two-party consent state, you're screwed. Recording technology is not exactly the avenue to go. The first step, if you think you're in trouble, is to get a hold of an attorney and find out what they advise you to do. If they say it's a one-party consent state and you're good to go, then by all means listen to your attorney. But as a general rule, I don't advise people to do that because it's entirely too risky.
Do you mind if I add something on that?
Absolutely.
Look, everybody wants to game the system. Men are problem solvers. You want to have solutions. If you think you need to record something the bitch is saying, you shouldn't be there. Get the fuck out. It's just like, look, if you can't trust her, right? She says she's coming home from the grocery store and it takes her 45 minutes for a 10-minute drive, and you know she's lied about going to the grocery store. Let me tell you something. She's lying for a reason. It's not because it's Tuesday. It's not because there were clouds in the sky. She's lying to you. Once you understand that she's violated the trust on one thing, she will lie about anything. So don't don't go out of your way, trying to armchair quarterback how to protect yourself with recordings or whatever. Good old fashioned evidence, having an attorney who knows the rules of evidence, being able to consult with an expert on this, and an attorney who's willing to do the discovery, whether it's interrogatories or subpoenas or depositions, depending on what your budget allows. Those things are going to be far more useful than trying to mitigate and armchair quarterback different things. Because, the point is this: even if you're still fucking her, the kid that you may conceive may not be yours. You may get an incurable disease or a false allegation. The best advice that I say is ghost in plain sight. Don't be there. Don't put yourself in those situations. It's a harder decision to make, but I guarantee you, it is the ounce of prevention that will save you potentially decades of unnecessary drama.
Yeah. One of the things that Human said during a conversation with Ross Jeffries way back when was, while the POA they'll teach you the verbal jujitsu to be able to deflect all these various attacks women throw. Well, MGTOWs don't be there. Don't even be there to get hit. That way, There's no there's no need for the drama. Just don't be there. That's the best way. The best defense is to not even have to attack.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'll tell you what, we're coming up almost on 2 hours now. It's like an hour and 45 minutes. I know there's a lot of questions that I've not answered, but again, I want to be able to respect MGTOW Esquire's time. I think it's been an awesome stream. It's been informative, and you guys have been fantastic. We're going to definitely be doing another one of these streams probably sometime the last half of January, early February. So look for it. And, for those people that are interested, either in coming on the show or people that might be interested in having a conversation, whether it be MGTOW or a subject directly related to things that are relevant to men, have them reach out to me via email. If you have subjects that you want me to talk about or things like that, definitely shoot that information out to me too. Right now, I'm kind of a one-man program, so there's only so many hours during the day that I can do things. So bear with me on that. But I think I'm going to close the questions down at this point, just so that we're all on the same page. Because, like I said, I don't want to push the stream past 2 hours, and we're coming up on an hour and 50 minutes right now. With that in mind, MGTOW Esquire, do you have anything that you want to close with?
No, that was an absolute blast. Thank you for having me. This was a very fun way to do the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had a lot of fun too, and it's really kind of nice to be able to sit and chat with somebody who's experienced it and has kind of that legal experience, and so we can kind of dig in on that. And also, I
Absolutely.
wanted to thank everybody who asked the questions. I apologize if I didn't get to all your questions right away.
Yeah, those are
And for
some
those,
good questions.
yeah. Now I'm going to refund the Bukaki choke slams for the questions that didn't get asked. If you do have other questions, I will say this: MGTOW Esquire is often in the Monkey Business Discord.
Yep.
Obviously, he's got his own law firm. He's very busy with what he's doing. But if you get the link to the Monkey Business Discord as TFM puts it out, that might be an opportunity for you to chat with him on your own, given your guys' schedules or his time, obviously. Um, but just as
Yeah.
an FYI.
Oftentimes, though, you got to watch it because sometimes when I'm listening to the monkey business thing, I'm sometimes playing a game. So
Right,
I
right.
may not be all there to listen to questions, but yeah, that's fine too. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream here. If you once you check out the channel, check out the other videos that we talked about, um, and then we'll just
And
go
buy
from
the
there.
book.
And yeah, and buy the book, and buy the book. Actually, the book's been selling ridiculously well.
I'm
I
not
looked at it.
surprised.
I looked at it the other day, and it was in back in the top 10 bestseller lists on 3 bestseller lists
Awesome.
on
Congratulations.
Amazon. Yeah, I mean, people are paying attention to it. So, yeah, absolutely. So again, always a pleasure. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And when I get this done, I will probably upload it. Hopefully, sometime tomorrow. I have another video I'm going to try to finish out today to get uploaded as well that I worked on the other day, and we'll go from there. And with that, I hope you guys have a great day.